Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another compilation, but this one is really special. I've gathered the absolute very best hidden JRPG gems of all time on all platforms. Oh yeah, let's begin! Fuga, Melodies of Steel. It might not be that obscure since it recently came out, but I feel it isn't getting the recognition it deserves. It was developed independently by CyberConnect 2, creators of the Dot Hack series and Sola to Robo. Actually, Fuga is part of the latter's universe, which also includes Tale Concerto on the PS1. You follow the tragic ordeal of several kids during a fictional war in a continent where humanity no longer exists. Their families have been kidnapped by the enemy army, so they want to rescue them. At the beginning they'll find a huge tank that will be used to traverse the landscapes and enemy bases. It will be used to do all the fighting as well, with each kid paired up with another one in a certain weapon of it. All kids are assigned to a specific different weapon and each enemy is weak to one or two of them. The gameplay will lead you through these 2D areas with several different routes to follow, although they all lead to the same boss at the end. Occasionally you will encounter these ruins where you'll be able to carefully traverse through traps in order to gain items that can be used to strengthen the tank's armor or weapons, and also to expand the facilities that can be used for various different purposes. Although some of these items can also be found during the regular routes, there's a whole lot more to this game than what I'm explaining here. It's such a unique experience that plays like no other RPG I've ever seen in my life. Definitely give this one a chance if you can. It's currently digital only, but I hope it gets a physical one day. Oninaki. Released on PS4, PC and Switch, it's the latest game by Tokyo RPG Factory. It's a beautiful dungeon crawler with some retro elements from classic action RPGs. However, it plays within an isometric environment as you go around fighting enemies with different weapons called daemons. These are summons that help you around in battle in the form of your sword. In fact, the game has a strong emphasis on this, basically revolving around the real world and the netherworld. Your main character, Kagachi, is some kind of reaper that defends the cycle of reincarnation, so most of the story quests will include helping NPC spirits pass on to their next life. Yeah, a very spiritual game with some dark elements and bizarre experiences, just the way I like them. Don't miss out on this little gem here. It got crushed by other popular releases a couple of years ago, but I still believe it's one of the best modern action RPGs nowadays. Art on Ellicott 2. I always felt people knew about these games, but the majority seems not to. They've become more and more forgotten over the years. I picked the second one because I rarely talk about it, but the first one is just as good. This one takes place a year and a half after it, but with other characters, conflicts and such. I don't feel it's that necessary to play Melody of Elamia first, but it's recommended. They're both science fiction settings with post-apocalyptic backgrounds. You will need to play the prequel to the series called R No Search to understand that last part. That's one turn-based RPG I also strongly recommend, by the way. Art on Ellicott 2 follows Croy, a knight of the church sent to investigate the origin of a horrible pandemic that's killing Ravatales, magical girls with the ability to sing song magic to fight in battle. Actually, the game revolves heavily about these girls, and there's different endings related to which of the Ravatale heroines you bond with the most. To bond with them, you'll need to play some mini visual novels when diving into their subconsciousness, which also helps to develop stronger song magic. This is used during combat with a few party members taking quick turns to attack their enemies, but also shielding their Ravatales. Using their different song magic previously built after several turns can do massive damage, so always focus on it for the bosses. This game has incredible character development, and despite its lewd content and silly appearance, the plot can sometimes take some serious dramatic turns and plot twists. Definitely recommended. Vanguard Bandits. Another marvelous game, this one localized by Working Designs. The world is at the brink of war over territories and political beliefs, including religious and philosophical beliefs. And in the middle of it all, several characters that can pilot these knight-type mechs fight in a medieval setting. So it's up to Bastion to determine the fate of the world in several different paths out there. Some decisions will heavily affect the flow of the story and eventually put you in a different route or ending. Each one of them takes around 10 to 12 hours to complete, so they're short enough to increase its replay value a lot. Battles are played on grids in terrains within an isometric view. Your mechs have several commands to choose from: attack, defend, avoid, counter. Then there's flanking, cooldown if you consume too much AP, which means there's a fatigue system. It does get in the way often, but it also applies to your enemies, so it's balanced. Also, the terrain matters, and it will play around the action points to increase or decrease your movement. It's very expensive nowadays, but fortunately, you can emulate it or still find it for cheap on the PSN. Knights of Azure. Two action RPGs were created by Ghost a few years ago. The sequel, which is on PS4, Switch and Steam by the way, is also a phenomenal game that I strongly recommend, but today I want to focus on the first one. It came from the PS Vita and PS3 only in Japan, but we got its remaster on PS4 and Steam. No Switch version for this one, even though it's better than its sequel in my opinion. In this gothic style and beautifully looking world, you play as Arnis, pronounced as Arnes actually. She's a half-demon sent by an organization to a remote location to protect the new sacrifice, but it just so happens that the sacrifice is her lover and best friend Lilith. The game will take place in this hotel, which you'll use as your base of operations to buy stuff, talk to characters, bond with Lilith, and level up. I can't show the level up part here because I fear YouTube will demonetize the video, but it's, well, very interesting to say the least. Arnas or Arnis, whatever, will constantly go to explore and re-explore the areas around the hotel in order to find the Night Lord and defeat it. Combat is hack and slash, but you only fight as Arnis with different types of attacks from light to heavy and finally special. She also finds some items that can be used to unlock creatures called servants. They will be your party members, each with different skills and classes like magical or physical, etc. The game has excellent combat and epic boss fights, as well as beautiful art style and gothic landscapes. Ark Rise Fantasia. A fated encounter between a soldier named Lark Bright and a priestess called Rifia results in Lark being the chosen warrior to stop the war and restore the world. However, the story here is like in the Tales series where one thing leads to another and halfway through the game, the plot has changed to something different from its premise. Yeah. Though I'd like to point out it is very well written, sadly it has terrible voice acting in English for the majority of its characters if you go with the physical version. If you're emulating, perhaps you may find a patch with the original Japanese dub. Anyway, in this colorful world you'll find yourself traversing in a very traditional style of gameplay, going from town to town with an overworld in between and various areas, ruins, dungeons, etc. No random encounters whatsoever, but it may be hard to avoid enemies here and there. All party members are bound by an action points bar and can only act if there are enough points. Yes, shared amongst them all, kinda like in Exist Archive. This is why combat is very strategic, as you'll need to determine if you want just one character to use them all in one turn or have everyone do something different. Sometimes you'll have a guest character out of your control, but they can really come in handy as this is a very difficult game. It's also a no bullshit grind fest, so you'll be fighting a lot before some of the nastiest bosses in the game. All in all though, it's a strongly recommended hidden gem, which also includes music by legendary composer Yasunori Mitsuda. Land Greaser 1 and 2 Remix. These two are remakes of Sega Genesis or Mega Drive games that came from the early 90s. Back then we only got the first one, so this modern release will be the first time for us getting its sequel. One is a sequel to the second, taking place in the same world, but many years apart. In both you'll play as a hero destined to hold the Sword of Light to determine the fate of the world, so there are several routes that can lead to several different endings. Not all decisions matter though, just some that are crucial to lock you in or out of a specific path. Which characters join you will depend on these decisions, of course. They're grid-based strategy RPGs where every character can act solo or as a commander of various units. These units have different classes and can be recruited for money as mercenaries. Commanders, however, namely your party members, can change jobs and train from there to unlock different classes. I know the visuals look low budget, but if that bothers you, then this video is not for you. It's about obscure games after all, not AAA titles. Anyway, I hope one day we can get the other Langrisser games remade in the same style or better. You can find this duology on PS4, Switch and Steam. Crystar. Crystar is on PS4 and Steam, recently ported to the Switch. You control Rei in search for her sister in Purgatory because she blames herself for killing her. After making a pact with some evil twins to get powers, she starts her quest, but she'll be joined by 3 other girls that are also on Purgatory but for different reasons. One button lets you change to any of them at any time. As an action RPG, controls are fast-paced but combo-based, so it's not a mindless button masher at all. You'll need to pay attention to these combos cause sometimes enemies can take different ways to defeat. It's challenging alright, but it isn't necessarily hard. Going through long areas gives it a dungeon crawler feeling, but it's just that, a feeling. The engagement will pretty much come from defeating enemies and the sinful demons that you need to purify. There are no towns in this game, stores are found usually at the beginning of each stage. Your resting time will take place at Rei's room, where she can cry her lungs out to customize accessories, unlocking abilities. Also to spend time with her dog. Story-wise, this is a game with some modern gothic art style with beautiful visuals. It balances greatly its girl power slice of life as this is an only girls game and knows when to go dark, twisted and tragic. Tears to Tiara 2, Heir of the Overlord. It's a sequel to an Only in Japan game, but thankfully it's unrelated, so this one stands alone. It takes place in the same universe but with new story and characters. It follows a slave to the Empire who's actually hiding, as he is the true heir of the legendary Barca family. Upon a chance encounter with a so-called goddess, they join forces to fight the Empire. It's a grid-based strategy RPG, but be warned, it's also a visual novel. There will be tons of reading sometimes, but there's still a lot of gameplay involved. A lot of anime tropes are there, but the main plot is serious and can get somewhat dark quite often. Battles will take place on maps with a limited amount of characters. It's great, but it isn't outstanding. However, small features make it way more fun, like Camille transforming into an overpowered demon, or your friggin' elephant carrier fighting alongside of you. Overall, it's a pretty good game with compelling battles and solid challenge. Super Robot Tyson OG Saga Endless Frontier. Before you ask, you don't need to play any other game in this long-running series to get into this one. As a matter of fact, it's quite different from them and it's developed by Monolith Soft. It's a futuristic setting in the Endless Frontier. You control Haken, a bounty hunter, and his assistant, the android Ashen. They explore the deepest part of some ruins, but only to find Princess Kaguya as the bounty herself they were looking for. All sorts of nonsensical things happen after that. It doesn't take itself seriously, it's mostly a comedy with some bits of intrigue every now and then, and tons of fan service. While the gameplay is traditional like in most JRPGs you'll see today, visiting different places with a world map connecting them, the combat is just not. The point of battle is to create different combos in each character's turn, beating the crap out of your enemies of course. Sometimes co-op attacks may happen between your party members, which include guest characters like Cosmos from Xenosaga. While the game's tough and challenging, this combat is quite addictive, though random battles can also take a while because of it. This is a similar battle system seen in Namco Cross Capcom, which never came out of Japan, but it evolved into what we now know as Project Cross Zone 1 and 2 on the 3DS. All these games developed by Monolith Soft too. This is such a great game. There's also a fan-translated sequel on the DS in case you're interested. Spectral Souls. 2 games were released on the PS2, only in Japan, and we only got the second one when it was ported to the PSP. Later, versions for mobile devices were released worldwide. Published by NIS America and developed by Idea Factory, Spectral Souls is a strategy RPG very reminiscent of its time. It follows the story of a war feud between several races, particularly the Demon Army and the Human Empire. You'll take control of 3 protagonists, each part of a different side of the war, fighting for their own motives. Matter of fact, you'll be switching regularly to these characters every few missions. It's a very well written plot, dark and mature. Customization is mostly based on increasing status when you level up, also equipping a variety of weapons and accessories that you can pay money to improve. The game's a natural born grindfest and it's very hard, so this one I recommend only to players experienced in tactical RPGs, but it's quite solid and in fact it's one of my favorite RPGs on the PSP. Fuga Melodies of Steel 2. Speaking about sequels, here's one that got released a few weeks ago. I praised the first game before because I absolutely loved it. A short adventure about a bunch of anthropomorphic kids ravaged by the ongoing war. This game is a direct sequel to it, so it's necessary to play the first one to understand this. Anyway, so the kids went their separate ways after the events of part 1. Now they're back because the Tarnished, the tank they used to fight in before, has gone out of control. A mysterious and evil guy steals it with a few of the other kids in it. So Malt, the main character, and his remaining pals steal a tank called the Tarascus that used to belong to the enemy empire to go and rescue their friends. The gameplay is exactly the same as before, traversing route maps in 2D with a few stops to do battle, gather items, or heal. Combat is still played in turns with up to 2 kits assigned to each of the 3 weapons of the new tank. However, each kit specializes in a certain colored type of weapon: machine gun, grenade launcher, and cannon. Obviously each is strong against some kinds of enemies and so on. Just like before, you can switch kits around every few turns to exploit that mechanic. This combat is a blast again. Back are the intermissions where you explore the tank, use materials to upgrade it or expand facilities, including the fishing facility, the diner, the beds and the farm. Having 2 kids talk will unlock bonding scenes between them and link attacks during battle. New features are there like the judgment system. Malt can make decisions that will affect his morals or his determination, leading to a different ending. However, there's one thing that I really disliked in this sequel. There's a tragedy that I won't spoil that almost broke my heart, and it happened somewhat early in the game. It's horrible and I'm sure it'll make some people stop playing this game. Apart from that though, gameplay wise, this sequel did not disappoint and it's just as addictive as its masterful predecessor. Blue Reflection Second Light. This game is a direct sequel to a game that's very rare and expensive nowadays, unfortunately, and because the 3 heroines of it are also playable characters here, deeply connected to the main plot, you kinda do need to play that one to understand this one, I guess. I say I guess because, just like many of you, I haven't played the original, but as soon as Hinako and her friends appeared, the protagonists of the first game, I realized it was a direct sequel. I don't think it's indispensable to play it though, I was fine playing only its sequel. After all, it takes place in a different place with several new characters, all trapped in a mysteriously abandoned world where they'll need to survive while tracking down their memories to escape. So it has survival simulation, but it's kinda like in the Atelier games. You find items and materials, mix them, and then you'll get better items or even small places inside the school. The school being the girls' base of operations. Visuals are beautiful here, and if you're into fan service, this is definitely a must play. Combat is amazing here, perhaps the best part of the game. It plays in turns with 3 active party members and 1 support character, but time flows and it only stops when you bring up the menu when a girl's turn comes up to select their action. It's an interesting twist similar to the combat in Atelier Ryza. Anyway, hope you give this game a chance despite being a sequel to an overly expensive RPG. Hexis Force. In the middle of a war, Levant and Cecilia will have to work separately until they meet to put a stop to it. That's the gist of the game, but obviously you'll have to do both playthroughs with each character separately, which is worth it because that's the only way to get the final boss and ending. Plus, each has their own storyline, events, dungeons, bosses and party members. It's also a fairly short game, perfect for beginners, not too easy but not too hard either. The gameplay is quite traditional in the sense of exploring towns, dungeons and your base of operations. There are no random encounters, thankfully you can see the enemies around and avoid them if you want to. In combat, you can use up to 3 allies and position them in a small basic formation. There's an RP required to use any skill whatsoever, but using them will fill up the Force Burst, which will let you execute a powerful attack. Enemies have elemental strengths and weaknesses so you can exploit them. Finally, there's a Judgment of Balan's Sight, and depending on your actions, it'll determine if you're leaning more towards creation or destruction. These actions include dialogue choices, running from battles, doing side quests, defeating bosses and all that jazz. This will affect the ending, of course. Anyhow, this is a fantastic RPG. Brigandine: The Legend of Runercia. It's a strategy RPG sequel to a PS1 game, but unrelated to it in terms of story and characters. The whole campaign takes place in the continent of Runercia, and it's your goal to conquer every single territory. You can choose between 6 different realms, each with their own protagonist. They all have their own reasons to participate in the war. The gameplay is divided in 2 sections. The first one is the organization phase, where you have to decide where to move your troops and commanders. You can also summon monsters here as long as you have enough mana. Each monster will always start at level 1 and they do die permanently in battle. Human characters will always be the commanders of each group of monsters, but if they get defeated, they just retreat. In fact, that's the whole point of the game, to defeat the enemy commanders until they retreat over and over again, eventually conquering their entire realm. The second section of the game are the attack phases. You select up to 3 commanders and their platoons to attack an enemy group. Battles will be played on terrain-affected areas walking in hexagonal grids. Commanders and monsters have different abilities you'll have to use depending on the situation, but as long as you bring down an enemy commander or 2, you'll have the battle won. This game is a masterpiece and I regret not having included it on my top 10 best modern strategy RPGs video. Too bad the physical version is also kinda pricey nowadays, but this game is strongly recommended. Mana Khemia 2. Unless NIS remasters this game along with its slightly more popular prequel, it'll always be a hidden gem. Years after the events of the first game, a new generation of students starts their term to become alchemists. Some characters of the first game come back as teachers, but I don't feel it's that necessary to play it before this one. You'll be playing on small periods involving homework assignments, which are either story quests or side quests. Some will take you to explore areas or dungeons, and others to synthesize stuff, like in the Atelier games. Synthesis is simple, nothing convoluted, but it'll get trickier the more you advance. It's also really helpful in creating better equipment for your characters. It matters a lot which protagonist you choose at the beginning, since there's 2 of them, Ulrika and Razelux. They both have their own party members and story, so it is recommended to complete a playthrough with one and then the other. Battles are played in turns from the side. You can use skills, magic, or even the items you synthesized for battle. Combos are there that revolve around switching party members mid-battle from one of your roster. It's really good and intuitive, and with some badass music to accompany both regular and boss battles. This game is surprisingly better than its predecessor, so I hope it gets remastered one day to rid itself of the hidden gem label. Super Robot Tyson Original Generation. So there's 2 games here, but I've barely touched the second one, so I can only vouch for the first. There's little to no point in playing it though, as it is a direct sequel to it, so you have to play the first one first. 2 main characters with different stories and maps await you. Eventually though, parties will merge and act as one. Story follows a war between several organizations because they can't make up their mind on how to stop an evil alien invasion. Now, this game is very tricky when it comes to its gameplay. Everyone will fight in their own mech, although later you'll be able to have them equip any mech available. Battles are grid-based with a pretty simple but really fast interface. It will be easy as hell at first, trust me, but then it'll hit you with some hardcore bosses. These difficulty spikes can be avoided if you know what weapons to train, level up and use. I'll be honest, I messed up my walkthrough even though I got pretty far into it, all because I didn't pay proper attention to the weapon system. Make sure you do, so you can have the full experience of these two criminally overlooked RPGs. Summon Knight Swordcraft Story. Another duology on the Game Boy Advance is this pair, spin-offs of the obscure Summon Knight series. So far I've only finished the first one, so that's the one I'll talk about. Though I'd like to say that what little I played of the second left me with a good taste. Didn't seem to be directly related to the first game though. Anyway, you can choose between a guy or a girl, and based on a small questionnaire, you'll get a different summon to aid you in battle. It's all about entering the tournament to decide who'll be the next craft lord, so your goal is to improve the weapon crafting and fight in this tournament and win it. But of course the plot will diversify into an evil plot taking place around the continent. This 2D battle system will remind you of the earlier Tales games, but you have no party members. Controls are very technical, but once you get used to a certain weapon, I suggest you stick to it until the end. I really enjoy this game and its lovely soundtrack full of catchy tunes. Encounter rate is really high here though, but you can control it with certain items or simply escape quickly from battle. The interface is so quick, I don't think it'll get on your nerves. Lost Sphere. Lost Sphere is a humble love letter to 16 and 32-bit classic JRPGs. Perhaps you're more familiar with I Am Setsuna by the same developers? Anyway, here you play as Kanata, a young boy with the power to use people's memories to restore lost towns. That's right, they've been lost to the White Void caused by unknown reasons, so Kanata and whoever joins him must find out why so they can stop it from spreading. This is a traditional style RPG, so you'll visit towns and areas with an overworld in between. Music by Tomoki Miyoshi is beautiful, often nostalgic and melancholic. Graphics are more on the indie side of things, even though the game's published by Square Enix, but the visuals are beautiful. In battle, characters can select their attacks based on a linear range so they can move around. These will affect the flow of battle, which never stops as in a real-time procedure, so choosing the position your characters will end up in after their turn is the key to success. Eventually you'll be able to fight on powerful mech suits, but combat will remain virtually the same. The game's not grindy, but it isn't a walk in the park either. But I do recommend it for beginners and veterans alike. Exist Archive. A collaboration between Spike Chunsoft and Tri-Ace. Kanata, no, not the same guy from Lost Sphere. He dies but wakes up in the planet of Protolexia. A bunch of other students, including some of his friends, apparently died too and are there. So with the help of a mysterious voice, the story will progress by finding the missing students and together find out what's going on and what's this Protolexia planet. No towns here at all, just a really small base of operations with a shop. The majority of its gameplay directs the player through areas or dungeons traversed in 2D with beautiful graphics. Some puzzles are present and most of them need to be solved through crafty platforming. Enemies can be seen in plain sight, and once you engage them, you'll be thrown into a full 3D perspective. Only 4 characters can partake in combat, each assigned to one action button in your controller. There's a player phase with an action points bar. It is shared amongst the party, so you need to decide how many times each character will perform their combos by clicking their assigned button. During the enemy phase, you can have your characters, especially the ones up front, to guard. But guarding each attack requires action points from the bar, so balancing things out is what you need to fight properly. The game's grindy and tough, but it's still very worth playing. Story can have different endings depending on your choices near the end, but it's a great plot, so give it a chance if you can. Cartia, the Word of Fate. This is a grid-based tactical RPG where you choose between 2 main characters. Eventually you'll need to play both, which is okay as it has an amazing story and battle system. It was developed by Atlus, but they got Final Fantasy artist Yoshitaka Amano to design all the characters. The game revolves around the Cartia, powerful summon cards that are intrinsically mysterious. Some are extremely dangerous and therefore some twisted people out there are trying to use them. A rebel group is already formed to put an end to this plot, but let me tell you, it can go very deep and political sometimes, usually with different perspectives making characters clash often. So the character development is strong here, especially on Lacrima Christie, one of the two main leads. She is one of my all-time favorite female protagonists. Now, the battles are placed on grids, and your characters can either use regular attacks or use their cards. Cards can be used to cast magic spells or summon monsters to aid you in battle. It's nothing complicated, so it's easy to understand and perfect for beginners. But like any other tactical RPG out there, it gets harder the more you advance. This is an excellent game and by far one of the best JRPG hidden gems on the PlayStation 1. Dragon Marked for Death. Developers of the Mega Man Zero and Azure Striker Gunvolt games, Inti Creates, brought this quest-driven action RPG to us. You probably didn't know it was also on PS4 because it had no physical release there, but the digital version lets you play with all 4 characters, unlike the digital Switch release. Unless you bought it physical, you had to purchase the game twice to get them all. Regardless of which character you choose, and they do control very differently by the way, the story and missions are almost identical. The goal is to take your revenge on the upper class, so you start in the lower class. To get further, you'll need to take on several different quests. Some will have you finding a specific item, others will have you fighting a boss, others rescuing people, etc. I like how that variety in objectives diversifies the repetitive nature of this game. Yep, it's played in 2D entirely, with great controls and combat, but the highlight is that this action RPG can be played with up to 4 players online or offline as well, in cooperative mode. That's where this game truly shines in my opinion. Sakura Wars, So Long My Love. Another rare and expensive game, but currently not that much. There's also a PS2 version of it, but I've never played it. The one I got my hands on was the Wii version, and let me tell ya, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was gonna be a cheesy visual novel full of anime cliches, but it turned out to be a very well written story with strong character development. There are several gameplay mechanics here, as this is one of those RPGs that mix everything. Decisions in this game matter a lot, and they are bound to this Steam bar. You need to choose wisely but quickly before it runs out. This also applies for a lot of puzzles in the game, including some Ace Attorney-like segments. Since the game takes place in the New York of 1928, most of the music revolves around jazz, and let me tell you, I'm not a fan of that genre, but still, I really liked it. Gives the game a hell of a lot of personality. Let's talk about the battle system now. It's played in turns, first as a strategy RPG. Battles with normal enemies will take place in small areas. Characters will freely move around within limited range. After this, you'll be taken straight to boss battles in the air, which will play similarly. There is no leveling up here or customization per se, but somehow you always feel as if your mechs are progressing. This game is truly a masterpiece. Well, you will see battle after 1 hour or 2 of its visual novel elements and puzzles. If that turns you down, I advise against it, as it is totally worth your time in every sense of the word. Arno Surge. I wish this game was as popular as the Art Tonelico trilogy. Those 3 mix some medieval fantasy elements, but they're mainly sci-fi RPGs, and it's not like they're that popular. But Surge is perhaps the most unknown of them all, and it's the prequel in the series. I've talked about this game many times in the past, so I'll be quick. Humanity can't live on Earth anymore, and now lives on spaceships, traveling the galaxy in search for a new world. 2 main characters that you'll be switching to regularly lead the adventure. Each has a singer, later known as Ravatales, magical girls with powerful abilities that create song magic to tear enemies apart. And in this battle system, while the Ravatale casts her magic, you can actually kill every enemy in the area if you want to in just one fight. Basically, small hordes of them appear and you create button mashing combos with your main attacker until it's the enemy's turn. You have to take damage directed at your girl to protect her and so on. It's a very fun combat despite being somewhat repetitive. Finally, like in the Artonelico trilogy, your character can delve into the subconsciousness of the ladies to play out small visual novel segments with some decision making. These will help them create better song magic for battles. This game is on PS3 and PS Vita. A modern remaster came out a couple of years ago, but only in freaking Japan. Dead End Request 1 and 2. You're probably tired of seeing me talk about these two, so I'll be quick. In the first one, you switch between Arata and Sheena. You see, Sheena is trapped as a character in an MMORPG she and her team, including Arata, created. So she'll have to, well, play the game and complete it to escape alongside other girls, and Arata will be the visual novel part, which is awesome by the way. The writing in this game is on a level I've never seen Compile Hard 2 before. The second game is 10 times darker and really messed up. You play as Mai, who is sent to a girl's orphanage after killing her abusive father. Her mission is to find her missing little sister within the confines of a mysterious town that goes Persona 3 during the night. The horrors in this game aren't that visual, but the narration and the supreme English or Japanese dub are more than enough to send chills down your spine. Both games have a turn-based combat where you can move around the battlefield to get a convenient position. Once you do, you select your attacks and can even send the enemy flying across the place until they bump to the walls or into each other for more damage. Request 2 is a direct sequel to 1, so I strongly recommend playing them in order. They are the best Compile Hard RPG so far. Lord of Magna, Made in Heaven. This is a humble harem on the Nintendo 3DS that's extremely fun to play. And well, I claim its humility because it looks like your usual fan service type, but that's actually barely present. In fact, it focuses more on the character development and the relationship with the girls, but it may charm you in an unexpected way. It follows the life of Lux as he tries to take over the family inn, but then he starts meeting one after the other a bunch of girls with mysterious powers. This leads him to want to unlock the truth behind their appearances. Going back to the gameplay now, I've covered this game before several times just because it has a very engaging battle system. You don't move on grids like the others, nope. Here you will move in limited areas, each character with their own range of attack. Every group of enemies has a leader, but you'll need to kill everything most of the times. Easiest and funniest way to do this is by positioning your characters strategically so their attacks can make the enemies bump into each other and vanish altogether. I guarantee the developers were very self-aware of this amazing combat idea, which is why they swarm the maps with enemies. Regardless of your personal tastes on cheesy stories, I think this is a must play on the 3DS if you want to get into strategy RPGs the easy way. Ragnarok Tactics. One of my personal favorites on the PSP, criminally underrated. It's a spin-off of the MMORPG Ragnarok Online, but you don't need to play that to understand this one. While I do believe it gets challenging as you advance, I still often mention this when beginners ask for a great entry into the genre. It is definitely one of the best strategy RPGs on the PSP. In Ragnarok Tactics, you'll be in the middle of a war between two major kingdoms, both caught up in a sinister plot. After the first several missions, you'll have to choose which route you want to follow with your customizable character. If you're a beginner, please start with Thorin, an ex-mercenary trying to stop the war in his own way. There's also Yuri and Cynthia, each part of the opposing faction, but those routes are slightly more challenging. You can switch to the routes throughout the game, but it's always better to stick with one. Main characters will have their own set jobs, but you will be able to create generic warriors to fight by your side and customize them. Overall, it's a beautiful game that welcomes beginners with open arms to tactical RPGs. Just like with most of the titles in this list, it smoothly prepares the player for what's to come, leaving out the nasty permadeath feature. Do yourself a favor and start with this excellent gem on the PSP. Sakuna of Rise and Ruin. Sakuna is a fun 2.5D action RPG that I wasn't expecting to like. Combat seemed awesome even though Sakuna was kinda hard to control, mainly because she uses this sash as a hook to quickly move to the walls or the ceiling. Once you get used to it, it's very fun, but I thought I wouldn't like it because it involves some farm simulation. However, since it was simple, only requiring the minimum to do, including the minigames, it also turned out quite entertaining. It diversifies on what you need to do to grow rice, because otherwise it'll be repetitive and boring. Basically, you take care of it for several in-game months, and when it's ready, it's time to prepare it in one way or another. Once it's done, you send it to Sakuna's realm, and that's how you level up here. I found that weird. Why can't I just level up by fighting enemies? Regardless, it seems to judge also how you performed in everything. And the story is about Sakuna, a spoiled goddess sent to an island infested by demons, but she gets caught up with some humans that wanted to shamelessly cross to heaven. They all do something gameplay-wise, like taking care of weapons, or the armor shop, or even the dishes, and these dishes boost Sakuna's stats during combat. Bosses are freaking epic here, and it's probably the best part of the game. This game is strongly recommended. Knights of Azure 2. This is a sequel to a game that didn't make it to the Switch, and I don't even know why. It's a fast-paced action RPG where you control a sexy heroine that's been cursed. She dies at the beginning of the game, but is brought back to life as some kind of vampire. She and her friends must hunt down an evil queen to stop the cycle of the new moon from completing and taking over the world. You'll fight with Alush, the main character, and you can have up to one female companion to fight alongside you, and up to 2 different creatures that you can recruit, train, and evolve. The controls are excellent here, as is the entire action. You'll fight through different gothic-looking areas and dungeons, killing an array of different enemies with regular combos or powerful combination skills. The soundtrack is superb, with some sweet, nostalgic melodies here and some gothic metal themes there. It does have several endings depending on the female partner you have the more points with. This is definitely a great game you'll play for its amazing action style. It's also visually stunning despite being on the Switch. Onimusha Tactics. Been a while since I last covered this one. Came out for the GBA, but it was digital on the Wii U, I think. Yes, it's part of the Onimusha universe, only whatever god you believe in knows why the hell Capcom decided to make a strategy RPG based on it. No, you don't need to play any Onimusha game to understand this one, it's 100 standalone, it's a spin-off. In a nutshell, you control Onimura and party in a quest to stop Nobunaga's ambition from fulfilling. Characters fight in mapped layouts within a view similar to Tactics Ogre or FFT. In fact, it plays a little bit like those games, but in a simplified way. Just don't expect a deep job system like in them. Everyone here has their default class set up from start to finish. Though I would like to point out that this one gets more challenging as time passes, but it's a strategy RPG. They're meant to be this way. Fortunately, it holds your hand for a while so you can understand the basics no problem. Trinity: Souls of Zilol. You follow the story of Arius, a half-elf seeking revenge against his grandfather for mercilessly killing Arius' father. So he becomes a gladiator first, and then an adventurer to get as powerful as he can for the final confrontation. Of course, several characters will be involved to twist the drama and offer a different perspective. Especially Dagda and Celine, your only 2 party members. You can switch to them at any time, and of course they control differently with their own unique skills and elemental attacks. And speaking about elemental attacks, that's what makes this game so hard. It has an easy mode, but I played it on normal just so I could measure its challenge. Anyway, I was saying that it's very challenging because you need to exploit the enemy's weaknesses, but the chance to hit some of the elite monsters or the bosses is very slim, so you need to be fast as you can. Especially since some of them can kill you in just a few hits and have tons of HP themselves. Other than that, you'll face some small puzzles and fight a variety of monsters in every area, but it's no big deal. Give this obscure gem a chance, it is strongly recommended for hardcore gamers. Relayer. Relayer takes inspiration from the Super Robot War series, As it's also a strategy RPG with mechs, it tells the story of Terra in search for her sister and missing memories throughout space. She joins the GT Labs, an organization in charge of star children just like her, natural-born warriors capable of piloting the mechs. Same mechs they'll use to fight the Relayers, an alien species that's out there to destroy planets and galaxies for different reasons. While the story and character design may appear somewhat silly, trust me, the plot is just not. It's serious, with even some unexpected dark twists and political dramas. Like many tactical JRPGs, you'll watch a bunch of scenes, play out a mission, and then return to base. Here, you can sometimes watch small scenes with some characters, buy and sell stuff, increase the power of your weapons with money, etc. Later, you'll be able to increase the stats of your mechs as well. Each character has a skill tree known as a space cube and a pseudo job system once you complete each cube, but you won't be able to change jobs anymore after choosing between two of them. Maps are grid-based and will take place around the stars in space, but also in ruins or bases around the universe. In the latter, terrain might matter a bit. Often you'll control guest characters who will only join you for that particular mission, and the amount of party members per map might also change depending on this. As you can see, the gun types can attack from afar and the melee ones up close. There's no magic here, but there's things like healing spells, buffs and debuffs. This is such an underestimated game. It's one of those that starts kinda slow, somewhat repetitive and dull, but the more you play, the more its story and combat pulls you in until you just can't stop playing it. Lunar Nights. So there's a series called Boktai by Kojima Productions. The first 3 were released on the Game Boy Advance. This 4th entry, while still part of the same universe, is different. It's a science fiction adventure with 2 different protagonists, Lucian, a vampire who is also a vampire hunter, and Aaron, a solar knight in training. This is an action RPG and these 2 guys control differently. Lucian fights with a blade and can also transform into a vampire bound by a transmitter. Aaron fights with a variety of guns, most of them greatly damaging undead enemies. Both characters can fuse with their summoned creature known as Terrenial, which helps a lot when fighting the vampire bosses. Actually, the goal of the game is to defeat these bosses and then send them into space by playing through a minigame controlled by the stylus. It's alright, not the best mechanic, but fun nonetheless. There's also a weather system and the environment will change depending on it. You can check it out regularly thanks to the thermometer, which measures it. This is a great hidden gem exclusive to the Nintendo DS. No, you don't need to play any of the other Boktai games to get into this one. Story is standalone and the game's easy to get into. Growlancer Generations. This is a small collection that includes Growlancer 2 and 3, each in its own disc. God, I love this pair. Real-time strategy RPGs, and I'm always going on about the series in my channel. Growlancer 2 has you controlling a long party of characters, but the first half of the game you'll manage just a bunch. It's a short game, but its difficulty shows up right from the beginning. What I love about these 2 is that there's always a different mission objective that can go from protecting someone or killing a certain enemy, or even doing something within a short period of time. And that's exactly what makes them both so frustrating but addicting at the same time. Growlancer 3, I felt it was slightly easier, but it sure beat the crap out of me dozens of times. It's different because you can strategize more, but only with a party of 4. It makes it less stressful controlling less characters, but then again, with less of them, battles feel more overwhelming. I strongly recommend these 2 titles. They're so unique, developed by the same people who made the Langrisser games. Search no more for RPGs to quench your thirst for a challenge, as Growlancer 2 and 3 will easily satisfy it. Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus. This is yet another game that's also on PS4 and Vita, including a Steam release. Standard PS4 version is actually an enhanced port of the original PS Vita game, so yeah, this is the one to go for. A bunch of students join together as a secret organization that fights demons inside portals. Portals that are connected to human emotions and their dark pasts. Story, while generic in some areas, keeps you interested enough to continue. It also has some small Persona-like elements, such as a dating simulator, but it's not as deep. Anyway, this is an action RPG developed by Falcom, so the combat is ridiculously good, with responsive controls and quick-paced action. You go into the portals to complete stages with puzzles, monsters, and a boss waiting at the end. Only 3 characters can be taken with you, but only 1 can be controlled at a time. You can switch to any of them at any given time though, and like in the Ys games with party members, each character is strong against certain types of enemies. The game's quite challenging, so consider yourself warned, and it includes an extra character with full episodes and missions revolving around them. Lost Dimension. It's on PS3, PS Vita, and yes, on Steam as well. Sometimes I think of it as an underrated game instead of a hidden gem, but unless it gets remastered one day, it'll probably and unfortunately keep being an obscure game. Anyway, you control a bunch of soldiers in the future where a powerful entity known as the End will destroy the world, unless these soldiers stop him in time. But to do that, they'll have to traverse a long tower with no means of escape until they face the End. To make matters even worse, a few of these soldiers are actually traitors, and the End will force the protagonist to determine who they are before moving on to the next floor. Regardless of if they're traitors or not, the party will be forced to decide who gets deleted out of the party, and they're gone forever. Great story and narrative here, full of intrigue, and that intrigue is composed by a gameplay mechanic which relies on talking to your allies to find out more about them. Eventually you'll have to enter a minigame to determine if they're the good guys or not. And finally, the combat. It's a strategy RPG where you can move your characters around in a limited range. Because of the stress, characters will slowly go berserk and you need either items or wait turns to prevent that. Other than that, they can attack with guns and also use a plethora of abilities. Some abilities, one character can absorb them from the party member you decided to off at the end of each floor. This is an excellent game and you already know it's very recommended. Soul Blazer. Soul Blazer is a top-down view action RPG that's part of the Quintet trilogy. Illusion of Gaia was one of them and it's probably the most popular. Terranigma only came out in Japan and Europe, but it's fairly known as well. Blazer is the hidden gem of the 3 as it got overshadowed by them. You take control of a divine servant that takes the form of a human warrior. An evil spirit destroyed the world, and the hero's job will be to save it by freeing human souls and restoring villages. 6 of them await you in a challenging ordeal until you can face the evil spirit. To do this, you'll have to go through several different areas, solve puzzles, free the villagers, and destroy the meat bosses. Controls are great even though there are no combos. Graphics are visually appealing as it's the gameplay and the overall interface. This is a great game that needs more attention, and no, don't worry, you don't need to play the others to understand it. They're all standalone stories. Fairy Fencer F. I don't think this game is as hidden anymore, considering it's already on 4 different modern systems, but still it's kind of unknown considering some people reject it for being a compile-hard RPG. I won't deny the story is dumb, with the silly characters and fan service galore, but it's all in a good sense. It's honestly one of the best comedies I've seen in a JRPG. The one I played is precisely the PS3 version, which is published by NIS America. Other versions were published by Idea Factory themselves when they started publishing their own games finally. Several composers did the music in this game, including Nobuo Uematsu. Hard to believe, I know. Your goal is to find the Fury weapons to stop a possible war between the goddess and the evil god. The battle system is like an improved version of any Neptunia game out there. Players have to position their characters for melee attacks to have the enemies inside their range. Once you do, you'll have to perform a few button combos lashing out at them. Magic spells are bound by a similar movement regimen. Once you transform though, you can do some massive damage to your enemies. Half of the game is kinda easy, but the second half will be a difficulty spike, so you'll have to start grinding eventually. Overall, this is a pretty decent game and one of the best developed by Compile Hard. The Legend of Nayuta: Boundless Trails. You play as Nayuta and Noi. Nayuta is a 15-year-old kid living in a very small island with his older sister. One day, a ginormous ruin falls out of the sky, so he and his best friend Signa go investigate. Well, they meet the fairy Noi in what seems to be another world, vastly different from theirs. They also meet a beautiful girl who seems to be in a coma and realize this world is on the brink of something sinister. There's too much for the plot to be told in a nutshell, but it's really good. Now, this game isn't traditional. There's only one town where you'll do all your shopping and talking with NPCs. There's a store that sells weapons and armor for Nayuta, but you need to find ore in order to upgrade it and get better equipment. There's a map in the other world with different areas you'll visit, each with a different climate, which can be altered later. When it does, everything including enemies changes. So you go around controlling Nayuta in simple hack and slash and some platforming in 3D. It works well despite being a bit frustrating at times. Noi moves by herself near you, but with an action button she can shoot magic spells at enemies. Now, both characters learn their abilities differently. Once you complete a stage, you get evaluated, and when you get enough stars, you go back to town to talk to this guy to have Nayuta learn a new move. Noi gets hers by defeating special enemies or elite monsters, or by advancing through the story. Combat isn't as great and fast as in the Ys games, but it's still decent enough to keep you challenged. Although I played on normal mode, it's fairly easy. My one and only complaint are the bosses. No, they aren't exactly tough or hard, they're extremely frustrating. Falcom wanted to be very creative with each, but all they did was make the battles tedious and annoying. Most bosses just aren't fun to fight, regardless of their difficulty. In this one, for example, I'm supposed to get up there to attack its core, and I only have a very short amount of time to do so, but I can barely jump unless I use a barrier spell. It's frustrating. You have no healing items other than food your sister cooks for you. At least it gives you experience when you eat it. Other than that, I still find the game to be quite fun and enjoyable, somewhat addictive as well, believe it or not. It also has a very friendly interface, being able to teleport in and out of town or stages instantaneously, so if you die, even with its cheap deaths, it doesn't feel like a chore to try the stage again. It's a really good game, and this remaster is definitely recommended. Lost Kingdoms. Let's face it, the cover says barely anything, it just shows a girl and some creatures including a dragon. It screams low budget and mediocrity. One of those early GameCube shovelware games, right? My brother, yeah, once again, he took his son to my parents' house for holidays about 10 years ago. He had a GameCube and a bunch of games and wanted to play with me. However, both my brother and my 6-year-old nephew warned me about this game. It sucks, it's complicated, don't play it. My brother had bought it for my nephew at a flea market. I knew nothing about it, but my nephew really wanted me to see how bad it was. So we plugged the console into the TV, put the game disc inside, and I confirmed it. A low-budget game developed by... wait, From Software? Anyway, it didn't take me long to realize it was an action RPG where you control Princess Katia in a quest to save her kingdom from a horrible plague. To do that, she'll use the power of the cards that she can use to summon creatures in the random encounters she'll face. She can also move around and use some of them as weapons to fight her enemies. Wow, no wonder why my 6-year-old nephew hated the game. A slightly complex action role-playing game is too much for a little kid. Me? I loved it! It didn't blow me away like the majority of RPGs in this list, but still, it far surpassed my expectations considering I thought for sure it was a mediocre shovelware game. Redemption Reapers. This amazing strategy RPG took me by surprise. Directed and produced by Hiroyuki Kobayashi, who worked on numerous Capcom games like Resident Evil and Devil May Cry. Written by the co-writer of the Metal Gear Solid series. This is a dark fantasy game where a foul race known as the Mort has nearly wiped out humanity. A group of mercenaries band together to fight them off, trying to form an alliance with the only remaining kingdom in their army. You'll command 5 playable characters through several maps with an isometric view. It's a bit inspired by Fire Emblem in a few features. For example, characters can carry and equip a bunch of weapons of the same type, and they break after several uses. Also, whenever you level up, the stat increase is random, but that's where the influence ends. Anyway, maps have hordes of enemies around and a few relics or treasures. The game has an easy and normal mode only. Once you choose, you won't be able to change it, so keep that in mind. It's challenging, but if you have experience, you'll be fine on normal mode. So you control your units moving on grids and attack regularly using attacks or skills, melee at the mercy of counters. But the awesome feature here is that if one or more allies are on the adjacent grid of the enemy, they can execute a cooperative attack. Basing your tactics on this feature is the key to success and ultimate enjoyment. At base, you can upgrade weapons with materials, repair them if they're broken or about to break, use extra experience points, buy items, and use skill points to unlock or upgrade abilities. This is a fantastic game! Shan Yuan Sword 7. This action RPG is part of a long-running series from Taiwan that mixes history with fantasy. This one takes place during the Qin dynasty and you don't have to play others to understand it. It's one of the very few of them that's been localized actually. You play as Taishi Xiao, I'm sure I mispronounced that, in a quest to save his sister whose body has been lost and now she's a ghost. All this during a civil war that also has enraged monsters and beasts all around. Problem is, he needs to find a way to return her to her real body. Lots of other issues will go on from there, but after the first couple of hours, she'll join your party. As an action RPG, it plays really good. There are small camera issues, but nothing troublesome, controls are great, hack and slashing enemies is satisfactory, combat is overall the best thing here. You use the triggers for regular attacks, strong attacks, which are based on your stance, and well, to change stances. Stances are acquired after defeating every major boss like this wolf, for example. The game does have an easy mode, but it's extremely easy. Normal mode though is challenging but not impossible, although this boss right here took me a few tries. Your allies will fight by themselves, but you can use one of their spells with the right combination of buttons. Like I said, combat is awesome here. Now, you don't level up here, instead you upgrade stuff like weapons or armor in the Elysium workshops, and you can also upgrade those. It's also friendly to backtrack since there are these monuments you can use to teleport, a live quality feature. Some really well thought out puzzles are there, but they will take you time to figure out. You can skip them if you want to though. Graphics are absolutely beautiful, but I'm sure you've noticed the big frame rate issues. It's not exactly detrimental to the gameplay, but it can be very annoying when exploring. That's the only major flaw here. Other than that, it's a fantastic game. I'm glad this series is slowly starting to come overseas. Eternal Poison. Instead of having 2 main characters, this one has 5, although the 5th one is optional and unlocking him is a huge pain in the ass. The other 4 play totally different perspectives with their own companions and part of the plot, plus most of their maps will also be different. They are all trapped in a quest connected to finding the Eternal Poison, and of course each one is on it for different reasons. The gothic art style in this game isn't just for show, as the story can be very dark and mature quite often. It's fun analyzing the various relationships going from treachery to even betrayal. Maps will put your characters on grids. You will always control the main characters of a specific route, plus recruitable monsters or mercenaries in town. In battle, each character will have different abilities and weaknesses to a specific element or type of attack. Animations are badass here, but they take a while to load. If that bugs you, just turn them off. Not much else I can say about a game I've covered to death here. It's pretty much a pillar of this channel. And you know what other game is also a pillar here? Grow Lancer Heritage of War. You'll play through several different story arcs until you reach the main one. On each, you'll see the tragic problems this continent is facing. A cold war, low resources, starvation, and monster invasion. So all characters will have to think hard on a solution to all of these issues as they journey across different lands. Not every mission will be top-down view, but most of them will. That way you'll get a wider perspective on the mess going on down there, cause Heritage of War isn't just an action RPG, it also combines RTS elements. For your party members, you'll have to select their actions and positions during the main missions. As for the character you control, you can also do the same or pretty much run towards your enemies and attack them. I love the variety in mission objectives, the creativity in them, the story arcs, the plot, the art style, the characters, the music. Masterpiece.